Acquiring starting pitching in season is not cheap. The Milwaukee Brewers just learned that. If you're a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers, you just learned that. This is the Brewer Fanatic Podcast, Emergency Edition. We're here to break down Milwaukee acquiring right-handed pitcher Quinn Priester in exchange for Yoferi Rodriguez, a Comp A balance pick in this year's draft, and a player to be named later. It's quite a mouthful. Big package going back to the Boston Red Sox to bring in a right-hander who was formerly a first-round pick of the Pittsburgh Pirates a few years ago. This is his second change of scenery trade in as many seasons. He was dealt by Pittsburgh to Boston last year, and now he's coming to Milwaukee to presumably slot immediately into a rotation that has almost unfathomably been decimated by injuries. Nestor Cortez was the latest shoe to drop. He's now on the IL, leaving Freddie Peralta as the only healthy starting pitcher from the projected 5 who are going to be in that Brewers rotation. And we are only basically a little over a week into the season, week and a half. So not a great situation for the Brewers rotation. They did go out to make a move to address it. But first, I'm going to turn the floor over to prospect enthusiast Spencer Michaelis to talk about his thoughts on this deal before we dive in a little more.
Yeah. First of all, I will say my reaction on Twitter was probably a bit over the top. So I will start off by that. I think my initial reaction is that I just really, really do not like this trade. After looking into it further, I'll take out of really, and I'll just say I really do not like this trade. Yoferi Rodriguez, he's a good prospect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not the biggest Yoferi Rodriguez believer. For reference, I'll just throw it out. He was 13th on my list overall. So it wasn't quite as high as like 7th, which I believe Pipeline had him 7th. But he was one of the top outfield prospects in the organization, in an organization that currently, while the major league depth is pretty good, I would not say the same about the minor league depth. Braylon Payne in the lower levels. Jose Anderson is in extended spring. He's not even really in full season ball yet. Otherwise, you are now basically down to a bunch of kind of interesting guys, but nobody with real like prospect pull, I guess, in the lower levels. So giving up Yoferi in a trade like this on its own is interesting. I think if the deal was fully just Yoferi Rodriguez for Quinn Priester, I could probably, I don't think I'd like it, but I think I'd be like, okay, I get it to an extent. Priester, we'll talk about it in a little bit here, but Priester does have 6 years of control, team control. There are interesting things here. He has made some strides this year. So Yoferi on his own for Priester, I would be like, all right, I get it a little bit. It does bug me when you include the competitive balance round A pick. I think the Brewers need to continue to stack really good drafts in order to keep doing what they're doing. That doesn't mean they can't trade the pick or they can't trade prospects in the meantime to continue to improve the major league team. But this is pretty close to $3 million in slot value that they have given up here in the draft. And just for like a point of reference, like Eric Batanti and Cooper Pratt combined to sign for less than $3 million. Those are two pretty big prospects. Pratt's already in Double-A as a just turned 20-year-old. Batanti's hitting balls 114 miles per hour in Major League Spring Training as a 19-year-old. You can get quite a bit of talent and important pieces potentially for the future or for, their own version of a trade with that pick and with that slot money. So willingly giving that up, that makes it difficult. The player to be named, who knows what that's going to be, but I mean, there's still another player that's going to be moved. It doesn't say or cash. So there is going to be another player as part of this trade. And Jack, we'll talk about Priester, so I don't want to dive into that too much. But I just think on the whole, that's a lot to give up for a guy who really, like you said, was a change of scenery guy last year. Nick York was traded for him. York was a change of scenery guy on the Red Sox side going to the Pirates. And now this feels like a trade that you would have made for somebody who was kind of established or that you felt really solid about helping immediately. And I don't see that with Priester. It feels a little bit like I don't want to say desperate, even though I said it in my tweet, but it feels a little desperate. Like it feels like, oh boy, we are really at the end of our pitching depth. We need to make a trade. Again, Priester's a little different because it's not like you traded for a guy who only helps you this year. If he does work out, you could have him for quite a while. The Brewers do have a lack of pitching depth, I should say, in the upper minors, and then also under team control moving forward. So to that extent, I do get the appeal with Priester. I have never been a huge fan. I know he made some improvements, but it feels like a lot to give up for a guy like that. So that's where I'd say on the Brewers side of things, but in what they gave up at least. But Jack, I guess, what are you seeing with Priester? I know you've had probably a little more time to look into him than I have since this dropped, but yeah, what are you seeing with the changes and everything?
Well, first of all, on that note, this is Spencer Michaelis coming to us from his car on his
Yep.
lunch break at work. So
Yeah.
this is really raw reactions here. I know you've had a little time to settle in, but yeah, I've had more of a chance to look into it a little bit. So I mean, to me, this comes back to what do the Brewers think he's capable of, and what is he going to give them? It is important to note that this does actually fall into kind of a mold that they've talked about before, and that they're not only interested in making acquisitions that help them right now, but they especially like acquisitions that can help them both now and moving forward. I'm just assuming here, just giving them the benefit of the doubt that based on what their models are probably saying about where Priester's stuff is at right now and where his makeup's at right now, yes, this is probably still an overpay, but my guess is they don't see it as a
Yeah.
massive, blown out of proportion type overpay. Because again, like we're talking about, it is never cheap to acquire controllable starting pitching, even if it's not a great pitcher. But if their models are saying, hey, this guy looks like a mid rotation arm
Mm-hmm.
for the next 6 seasons, I'm sure that they're actually probably pretty comfortable with what they gave up. Maybe a little more than they would have liked. There are no trades where you're going to be fully comfortable with everything you're giving up, because if to get value, you got to give away value, and that's absolutely what they did here. I'm not entirely sold that he is going to be a mid rotation guy long term. So the interesting thing about him is, like, you can basically, when I looked up, just trying to get a first read on him, get some reports on him, one of the first things that they had at Fangraphs was there's a divide between the way that scouts evaluated him and then how his stuff actually grades out. So then I went and watched some video. It took like I saw like 3 pitches of his delivery, and I'm like, "Yep, I can absolutely see how this is a guy where scouts watch him pitch with the eye test, and they're like, this guy's it. He's got the build. I can see how he went in the first round because it's a very clean, smooth, traditional kind of over the top delivery. Like, I can absolutely see some scouts, especially for an organization like Pittsburgh, which had a reputation for a while of being a little bit behind the times on pitching development. I can absolutely see how, you had some guys who could have been sitting back there watching him pitch and said, we just like the projectability of this guy. We like the frame. We like the stuff. The curveball actually from Fangraphs, and this is when he graduated from prospect status in 2023. The curveball grade at Fangraphs that they gave him was actually a 70. So that was always seen as his like his pitch, his bread and butter. But it actually hasn't played amazing with the rest of his stuff. I'll pull the results up in a second. The results were actually pretty solid last year in the minor leagues. But I read some more scouting, and there were basically just concerns about his ability to tunnel it with the rest of his arsenal. Like, guys can see it pretty early, so he hasn't been able to use it nearly as much as he wanted to. Really, the issue for him was, and I think this is something you run into a lot now that we have modern ways of evaluating pitches and modern means of evaluating pitch shapes. The problem for him was always the fastball, and I can absolutely see where that comes into play, just kind of having a little bit of experience of, being around some people in some areas of the game who have more of that old school style of scouting, and then doing what I do, both covering the Brewers and what I do for college ball, diving into more of the numbers to project how a pitch is going to play. You can absolutely see a guy sometimes, and just from watching the radar gun, he did sit a little higher velo wise when he was really at his peak prospect status wise. You see the velo, you see the delivery, you're like, this looks super repeatable. I like this. And then you actually start to look at the shape and you're like, oh man, this is dead zone. It's getting destroyed by big league hitters or even professional hitters at any level. And that's kind of what he's dealt with a little bit. So the arsenal for him: sinker, slider, curveball, changeup, and four seamer is what it's been for the most part. So I'm going to pull up, if you're watching on video now, just some graphics from, not really graphics, data from Savant. It's 2025, man. Like, how do they not have stuff to visualize short form movement yet? I don't understand that. But that's an aside for another day. So on the top, you're looking at, I really should have put this the other way. On the top is how it's looked in his lone start with Boston's AAA affiliate this year. And on the bottom is how the stuff was looking last year in the minor leagues, a year split between Pittsburgh and Boston. Actually, I'm going to quickly scroll up here and see if I can split this by team really quick, because he did change teams midway through the year, because that might actually give us a better idea of kind of what we're working with here. It's going to throw off the way I have this all presented for a little bit, but that's okay. So let's go like this. Okay. So last season, actually, I don't know if there was really much of a change here. I probably could have just kept it the way it was. But last season, let's just go with what he was working with in Indianapolis and in Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh's minor league system a year ago. So last year, the sinker, average velocity 92.8, 14 inches of arm side movement on average, and about 4.5 inches of induced vertical break. So kind of not full on sinker shape. 14 inches is not a lot of run. You're probably talking more about a pitch that's kind of residing in this weird area where it's not fully a sinker. Maybe it's a little more of a two seam, but there's still not a lot of run on that. So that's what you were working with at that point last year. The slider was just kind of a short, looks like a gyro basically, because he's sitting at like 2 vert on it. Changeup, nothing amazing there. Again, kills the vert on it pretty well, but not a ton of arm side movement. I think this looks a little better than the sinker did at that point. And then again, you got the curveball that is okay movement wise. The results on this are not great, but he had a 50% whiff rate in Indianapolis. Just you can see some stuff here, but I think the main thing to keep coming back to here is that just the shapes were not playing great. Things actually got worse for him with the fastballs too after he went to Boston. It looks like nothing really changed shape wise for him at that point, but almost a 400 weighted on base against the sinker after the trade. That's really what you're talking about when you're looking at some of the issues here. But he did make a couple of changes now that we're going into this year, and I think I'm just going to pull it back to the totals here for pitch shapes, just so we can get the comparison a little bit cleaner here. Basically, the biggest change that I'm seeing here is, number one, the sinker shape just looks a little bit better to me. It's still not great. I think now he's a little bit more in like potentially playable two-seam territory. So on the whole last year, 5.1 induced vert, 14.8 arm side. Now in that lone start this year, 7.5 inches of vert, almost 17 inches arm side. So he's kind of put it into a little more of that two-seam territory, and he's getting a little more run. So I think that's not a bad thing. But really the change that I'm coming to here, also the velo is a big one too. I think that's a big key to this whole thing. So 93.2 on the sinker last year, averaging about 95 in that first start this year. There was more velo from him in spring training as well, so he carried it over to that first minor league start. The other change here is the cutter. So basically what appears to have happened here is, I don't even know if added or created a cutter is the right word. I think he just turned his four-seamer into a cutter, because his four-seamer never had much lift or much arm side movement. So last season in the minor leagues, 13.5 inches, of induced vertical break on the four-seamer with only about 5 inches of arm side. That's a very straight pitch that doesn't have ride either. You're just not – that's a pitch that's not going to fare very well. And again, you had a 360 roughly WOBA on that pitch against AAA opponents last year. This year, there were a couple pitches he threw in that first start that got tagged as four-seamers. Those had 7 inches of arm side. But this cutter here, the vert is basically unchanged. It's, again, at like that 13.5 induced vert and then 1.3 inches of arm side movement on average. So that's the thing here. A little bit inconsistent with the shape. And I looked at some plots of it before we jumped on here. It was kind of just like straddling the zero line instead of being consistently on the glove side as far as how it was moving. You can still have a pitch that has some perceived cut, even if you're on that arm side of the graph, depending on the angle that you're throwing it from. But I think really the key for him here is going to be how do the Brewers make that sinker cutter combo play up, because we've seen how much the Brewers like to throw different kinds of fastballs. He's got 2 of them. I don't think the four seam's coming back because I'm more we don't know for sure. Someone's got to talk to him, but I'm more convinced that he essentially tried to turn that four-seamer into a cutter because the velo on that cutter as well, almost 94 on average in that start, which is where his four-seamer was before as well. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how do they get those 2 pitches to play together. Still got the slider, still got the curveball. There was one slider he threw in that start that was way more of a sweeper shape. I don't know if that means he's working on that or if it just came out of his hand differently. I think the shorter gyro plays here, though, because that cutter is like a lift cutter. It's a cut ride that he could hopefully get a little bit more consistent cut on. But that was kind of messy analysis. That's just my initial look at this, though. I've only had maybe half an hour to actually dive into this here, so I haven't gotten very far yet. But the key things to take away here after all that is he's throwing harder. And I think that cutter has him on the right track to having a better second fastball. So there's been some steps with 2 fastball shapes and fastball velo, but still, I don't think it's there yet either. So I'm not sold on him as a viable big league arm right now, but obviously the Brewers must be, because that's presumably where he's going to end up right off the bat.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think Adam McKelvey even said he'll be reporting to the big league roster. So I mean, you covered a lot of it. I think the thing that stands out is that there has been a velo bump. It seems like it's helped the sinker play up a little bit better, or he's just improved the sinker a little bit along with the velo bump. The cutter's definitely a change, and it makes sense. Like you said, this was a bad four seam. I mean, a really, really bad four seam shape. That's a pitch that would get destroyed. The velo bump might have helped it slightly, but it still would have been a really, really bad four seam. Right now, it's not a very good cutter, though, either. So, like you said, I think he's on the right track with that. I think that's where he needs to take it. And the Brewers have been able to help, cutters come along as an organization. It's been something they've been pretty decent with in the past, but it still needs to take some steps. And that's the tough part for me here, is that, yes, I know part of this is that you are filling today's issue, which is, 7 starters on the IL, and that's not even including the Woodruff and Robert Gasser, who we knew were going to be hurt. I guess Quintana's not on the IL, but still working his way back as well. So either way, you are very, very shorthanded. So yes, there was a need for a starting pitcher, probably. I would imagine this trade is more aimed towards the future than anything else. And when you look at it through that lens, I guess maybe I can see a little bit more of the logic when I think of it more for a future use. Because right now, I just don't think he is really a big league pitcher. Like you said, I think he's still somebody who needs to figure out the cutter. He's got to find how that plays with the slider and the curveball, which can be decent pitches. Can he keep the velo bump that he's seen? Is that going to remain, or is that going to be an early season kind of fluky thing, which we have seen plenty of times I think of Brett Wachowski for the Brewers last year, and he ended up still throwing harder than he did in college, but in spring and then his first start, he was touching like 99. And then as the season progressed, he was sitting more in like that 94, 96 range and never really getting above 96 or 7. So how real is the velo bump? We're going to find out. Is that cutter going to be able to develop a little bit further to being, one, more consistent, but two, just really, I think we need to, like you said, he's kind of straddling that 0. We really need to start seeing it on the left side of the 0 line in the negatives with the movement at some point. It doesn't need to be crazy, but it does need to get on the other side more consistently. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing with me here. It's not that I'm like heartbroken about losing Yoferi Rodriguez. He's somebody that if you told me the Brewers traded him, I would have been like, okay, like I get it. I guess I should explain that a little bit. I just touched on where he was, but like, I don't think that the power is going to be there for him long term. Though I should note, now that he's going to Boston, which is arguably the best bat speed development organization in baseball, there's a chance the power is going to develop there, which could make this look worse. I don't really know that he's a center fielder. I don't know that he has the athleticism for that. He does get good reads. He gets good jumps. His arm is okay. There's a decent chance he's kind of limited the left field in the future, I think, defensively. So to that extent, I do understand the Brewers maybe being a little lower on him than where, Pipeline and places like that had been ranking him. The draft pick part is going to be hard for me to swallow because I obviously nerd out about the draft in general. So that is part of it, I'm sure. But I do think there's a lot of value in having almost $3 million extra dollars in slot value. And the Brewers would have been up there for all teams in slot value this season. And that would have given them some control over the draft. They could have kind of maneuvered the draft how they wanted to. And I think that's a little harder now, even though they do still have a lot of picks and a lot of slot value. I just like the ability to be able to kind of control things. But yeah, I don't know, man. I haven't had time to really, really dig into it, and neither have you to a full extent, but like, I just don't really see it. And I guess I can kind of see the vision now that you've laid it out a little bit, like where they want to go with it. But this just feels like a pretty big project for a guy who's 26 already. Like he was a former top prospect, but he's not a young dude. There's still a project in there. It's a guy
24.
He's 24.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's a little better. I thought I had seen on Twitter he was 26. 24 is more reasonable for a project, I guess. Then I'll take that back then. But it is still, it's a 40-man spot. It's a guy that's probably going to pitch in the big leagues. And at the same time, it's almost like, well, it would be better for him probably to be pitching in AAA and working on some of these things. So are we going to kind of stunt some of the development by having to pitch him in the major leagues because he is going to be needed, it sounds like. I mean, with the situation the Brewers are in, I think he's going to be there. The whole situation there's a lot of things that don't totally add up to me, and that's what's hard for me to fully understand. What I will say is, if the Brewers believe he can be a mid-rotation starter, and he does end up being a mid-rotation starter, this is a completely reasonable trade. It's completely understandable if that does end up happening. I just don't really see that happening. And that's where it's hard for me to get the value here and understand what they're going for. I've been wrong before. Bryce Terang's hitting the hell out of the ball this year. Didn't see that coming. So things can change quickly. But yeah, this one's hard for me to really wrap my head around it. I, even with some time to kind of relax, and like I did overreact, like I said, but I just, as much as I've tried to kind of convince myself of this, I'm still really struggling to do that. And when that's the case, I can usually talk myself into a Brewers move eventually. But when I'm really struggling to do that, that's when I start to get a little worried because I don't know. I just don't see it. I know I'm going in circles here, sitting in the car. I probably got to get back to work here soon. So, but yeah, this is a tough one for me.
I think the other thing to think about here, so you talked about throwing him into the big league rotation right away as opposed to developing him more. Yes, we don't know how long he's going to be in the big league rotation.
No.
He's going to be in there now because they have injuries, but you have hopefully Savali's time of being sidelined is relatively short. Tobias Myers is on the mend. If they're hoping that maybe he just needs to make 3 or 4 starts and then he's back down and then they do focus more on the development, maybe that's part of this as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm so everybody's talking about this as not everybody, but I see people characterizing this as a desperation move. I think there is absolutely an element here of, yes, they felt they needed to get somebody, and they needed to get somebody right now. But at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that was the only thought here. Like
Oh no.
This is the Brewers. I'm sure there was some thought toward the future here, and if the plan maybe is, hey, we need him to make this many starts right now, and then we can have a little development time. I almost wonder if they're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in this way. And under that lens, and then under the lens of thinking that he's he's on the right path, I would think the Brewers are more not 100% comfortable with what they gave up, but not losing a ton
Yeah.
of sleep over it. For me, I think it just comes down to they. I think what it comes down to is they think the sinker's a good pitch now, as opposed to being just a horrendous pitch. So I was just kind of doing some really quick research. I know like the TJ Stuff Plus models. There's a lot of stuff models out there, but the TJ Stuff Plus one has kind of become the more publicly accessible one now, because just if you're looking at pitch modeling, that's kind of the those visualizations and that model has kind of become one of the more accessible ones if you want to get at it, especially if you're looking for minor league stuff, because it's a lot harder to find minor league stuff ratings for guys. That version of Stuff Plus, the Stuff Plus rating on that sinker last year was 93. The Stuff Plus rating on it in that one start so far this year was 103. So that's a 10 it's a 10 percentage point swing. So basically it means his sinker went from being based on the velocity, the movement, the angles, and the way it comes out of his hand, all this stuff basically means that it went from being a 7% below average pitch to now a 3% above average pitch. And the pitch grade associated with it went from 46 to 64. Like my guess is, even if this isn't necessarily the exact model the Brewers are using, there's probably some element of, their internal metrics think that this pitch made a pretty big leap.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're hoping, if you can pair the cutter with it too now, you've got something that can work in front of the Brewers defense and in front of their run prevention model. We know how much the Brewers love to throw fastballs. We know how much they love to throw sinkers. So if they found a guy who their models say has taken a step forward in that area in a way where it can play now, and the Brewers, so final note on Priester, he's also a big ground ball guy. Like, he's posted ground ball rates well north of 50% in most of his minor league seasons. That's a big part of this as well. You put him in front of that infield defense, maybe things play a little better for him than they have so far. Although I checked his BABIP so far in the big leagues have not been very high. He's actually just gotten crushed more than anything in terms of like home runs and just loud contact. But while I'm not sold on it, I think I can see what the vision is here. So now we kind of just wait and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah. And we should at least mention, like, the point about the control is important, because if you look at team control for the Brewers starting rotation past this year, it is Freddie Peralta for one team option year. You have Tobias Myers, at least, among people who are at least semi-established in the big leagues. Tobias Myers he'll have 4 years after this year. And then there's nobody. I mean, you're talking about guys who are on the 40-man who haven't really, like Chad Patrick, Logan Henderson, Carlos Rodriguez. Those are the controlled starters beyond that. So you have Ashby and you have DL Hall, but they haven't really established themselves either. So they're kind of in that same realm of, like, well, maybe they're starters. They're decent chance they're both relievers. So the Brewers are looking at this, I'm sure, and saying, well, if there is a chance that he's going to be a legitimate, MLB level starter who can do this for the next 5 years, or, depending how long he's up this year, 6, then that does factor in quite a bit, and there is quite a bit of value there if he does it. And again, my question is whether that will happen or not. I'm not so sure, but if they believe in it, then yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they feel too bad about the value they gave up here. If they, and I would imagine they do believe in it because they wouldn't have made the trade if they didn't. So I can see the vision from their perspective. I think it's just my opinion of that. I don't really see that happening. But again, I've been wrong. The Brewers are very good at pitching development, especially at the upper levels in the big leagues. They do a very good job of maximizing guys in the big leagues. So while I say, it could maybe stunt the development a little bit if he's in the big leagues for an extended time, it also might be where he gets the best instruction and learns the most about his stuff and figures some things out. So I can see it to an extent, but yeah, it's a tough one. It's a weird one for me. But the best case scenario for Priester is something that's actually very valuable and would be worth what they gave up. I think it's just, again, percentage and likelihood of that happening for me is not super high, but yeah, there is a world where this ends up looking totally fine.
All right, Spencer, I think it's time for you to get back to work, jump out of your car, enjoy the rest of your day. Try not to fret over a trade that you dislike too much.
I'll try. I'll do my best.
That's what we have for now on Quinn Priester. We'll see if anything changes for us in the next couple days here. We'll have the normal episode dropping later in the week. If there's anything that we want to walk back or add to, we will circle back to it. But that's kind of the initial read we have. Quinn Priester joining the Brewers again from the Boston Red Sox in exchange for Alfredo Rodriguez, a Comp A balance pick, and a player to be named later. Pretty big package the Brewers gave up, so we'll see how much Quinn Priester ends up contributing to the starting rotation, both now and then long term.